Welcome back, everybody. I'm pleased to announce our next speaker. David Teachout grew up as a Christian fundamentalist, attending Bible college and receiving a bachelor's in theology and psychology. Since deconverting from religion, he has attained his master's in both forensic psychology and counseling psychology, and he is currently working on a doctorate in clinical psychology. I met David when he agreed to speak at the Conference on Religious Trauma earlier this year, and then again when he was a guest on my Divorcing Religion podcast. Today, David will be addressing the continued religious trauma of demands for purity. Welcome, David Teachout.
Thank you, Janice. As always, happy to be here. And I believe that you'll be screening some questions, and which we'll be able to get to at the end. So by all means, anybody who has questions, definitely send them. And I will do my level best to address any of them at the end. So yeah, we're here basically talking about, religious trauma, how it continues in connection to demands for purity. And really we're going to be highlighting one of the most amazing gifts that the intersection of biology and consciousness has provided our species, and that is sexuality. It's so an indelible part of who we are in all of its many manifestations and different aspects of how it is expressed. And because of that power, because of that, it is more than just biology, that it is in fact a means through which we understand ourselves and the world, is frankly why it is a force that is often looking at being, if not outright controlled, at the very least, guided in a very specific, often authoritative direction. And with that, we turn to an article from Stephen Diamond that, where he talks about how sex substantiates, humanizes, incarnates existence. It produces joy, love, comfort, affection, and sometimes, ecstasy. And ecstasy here is not just a physical, it's a psychological and sometimes spiritual experience. The etymology of the word ecstasy is ecstasis, the temporary transcendence of time, ego, our shared human fate of existential separateness. Sex connects us not only with another being, but with our own being in humanity. Understood through that lens, it's really not a surprise that institutions and the ideological structures that support them at times are looking at wanting to have us look at our sexuality through a very narrow, myopic lens. That if they can get us to agree to sexuality as a simplistic, in particular, form of judgment, therefore, not only is one of the things that produces some of the greatest things that we experience individually, but also together, is somehow then, limited, but the idea of transcending our individuality at times is taken away. Particularly in religious forms of authoritarianism, we don't want, certainly they don't want any other form of transcendence. They don't want a idea of that we could somehow experience more of our humanity through our humanity. They want that limitation. And because, of course, the only proper way then must be through, you guessed it, their institution, structure, and so on. So with that, we're going to take a look at a few different aspects of sexuality as a foundation element of being human. And by all means, chuckle or not, or find, maybe even a little bit offensive. We are using utensils here around how spooning can lead to forking. Yes, indeed. And it's essentially sexuality is how we interact in and with the world. Not the only way, but it is a very significant way. And one way of looking at it is through what is, we'll go into some of the resources, at the very end, but it's this notion of a sex slot machine from the book Perv by Jesse Bering. Highly recommend, if for no other reason than having a ton and ton of paraphilia words to use for Cards Against Humanity. It's just lots of fun. But in that, it goes to this idea of effectively we kind of have this machine, swirling machine, slot machine, where we're like, okay, how do we enter into this world? And we do so in multiple different ways, of which we have very little control over. And that is, around orientation. So we come into the world as, heterosexual, homosexual, bisexual, none, asexual. Target, is the way that we direct our sexual energy and our interests, towards people, animals, inanimate objects, or none, if it, gets connected with asexuality. Behavior is a so-called normal. And by normal, there is not meant any kind of moral judgment. It's just normal in the sense of like, the standard deviation kind of thing. It's like the vast majority. Various paraphilias as they connect with both courtship and sexuality itself. Yeah, there are different forms of that. Or just simply, masturbation. Is this how you primarily express? And so, and of course, none of these are supposed to be meant as, rigid boundaries. There are concepts to be able to help explore, the experience that we're having. But we largely come into this world and we then view it, this basic way of seeing ourselves and how we interact with others, through, these things that are largely handed to us before we have much of a choice. And then we then are having the potential for choices later on, which is where the control thing comes in. We'll get to that in a second. But as well, then it's also through our relationship markets. I'm using the term markets here in a very generic sense of areas of influence, areas of expression. So family expression, we come into this world and we have our ways of how we consider our, spiritual, our sexuality, and frankly, our spirituality, through our family relationships, through, those initial lessons that were handed down, both explicitly and implicitly, about what you are and are not allowed to talk about, watch, consider, or express. Political, of course, we have no end of examples of how sexuality is used in the political sphere, not least of which most recently in Roe v. Wade and abortion, but also, various rights concerning, human sexuality and its expression. But also then in enterprise. And by enterprise here is meant, what is usually looked at as markets, but advertising and sales and so on. I mean, we literally have everything from kids dressing up in weirdly provocative outfits to go on these weird ways of contests and whatnot, all the way to burgers being sold by gyrating women. I mean, the idea here is, of course, and this is one of those things where, especially if you grew up in more religious fundamentalism, the often characteristic of advertising and so on is being, oh my gosh, they're using sex to sell this again. And really here, we want to kind of actually turn this upside down. We actually want to take that rather than as a pejorative and go, yeah, it's being used to sell things precisely because it is such a powerful force and so central to how we consider ourselves and our relationship in both to others and the world at large. So of course we're going to use it to sell everything from cars to food to and then of course the obviousness of dating apps. For whatever reason, my Facebook recently has been inundated by eHarmony ads. No clue. Kind of missed the mark on that one, but there it is. And so we are looking at this like, okay, so this is how we're seeing the world. And now I know it's a complete faux pas to quote oneself in a presentation, but this is actually something I wrote years ago and frankly just still enjoy it. And when we're looking at all these things, it often is a possibility that we will, look at and go down certain ideological paths where it's like, well, it's not really about, sexuality. It's about how we, the expression and some kind of spiritual thing and so on. I'm like, no, it really is. Let's just face it. It's about sex. It's about being able to discuss one's sexuality and accompanying feelings without committing to any particular form sexuality may take. That yes, indeed, we can talk about these things and have it actually be just an expression of, well, let's figure out all the very many ways that humanity can interact with one another. That yes, it's about being able to sexually express oneself as often as desired without being called slut, whore, or anything else. Yes, it's about being able to have sex with any gender without being called abomination or having your children taken. Yes, it's about sex in a consensual and healthy manner that is of benefit to all involved. Yes, it is about the sex, and being okay with that may indeed be the most revolutionary thing of all. And being okay with this fundamental piece of who we are is actually going to be one of the most freeing, and because of that, the most problematic journey, especially if we've come from an authoritarian, more religious, background. One of the most problematic, but worth and worthy as we find ourselves to be that journey that we will, embark on. And of course, many of the ways that authoritarian structure that many of us grew up with is about guiding, curtailing, and controlling this kind of instinctual energetic means of individual expression. Which is another way of, defining sexuality. It's this in double way of seeing one another. And so, they'll often in authoritarian structures there conflate sex with gender. And the purpose there, we often, think back to some of the classes we took or the sermons we heard where, it was like, no, who you biologically are is somehow a way of destiny, that it must therefore mean how you express yourself, how you think about yourself socially. Who says? Clearly not. It's not a requirement. And yet that is. I mean, how often did we hear in sermons and so on about, well, everything from the completely disgusting and pejorative, frankly, way of saying boys will be boys. No, not in that way, but okay. Or, it's just, girls, being what they are and so on. Like, no, there's no, there's no requirement here. Just because you're born in one way does not mean that the expression of it has to be narrowed in a particular way. Hence why so often they'll look into social roles. How do you show up as your sex as a means of judgment? It's a way of, how did I remember a story. I was doing security actually, and I was still very much deep into fundamentalist Christianity, and there was a woman supervisor who came in, and we had gotten into some conversation. I have no idea how, but we got into a conversation around men and women workplace, men and women marriages, and so on. And I made some kind of, in retrospect, completely asinine comment around, well, people need to know, the role, marriage. Yes, the ridiculousness of youth. But anyway, made some kind of comment about this, and she just looked at me and she's like, "Why?" Here she is, this powerful woman in charge. It's certainly in charge of me, and looking and going, "Why? Like, who says?" Like, why does this have to be this particular way? And I just kind of sat back and talked about a rather sheltered existence. For whatever reason, I hadn't quite, encountered, a different opinion too much there. It wasn't helped, so much by going to Bible college. But regardless, I just kind of, for whatever reason, it knocked me on my ass. And thankfully, I was already sitting down. And, it's like, oh, well, wait, who does say this? Why does this have to be it? Why am I judging by some kind of socially created structure for a role that is our creation? Like, how does this actually work? And hence why we often get into the stereotypes. Why? Because it's a means of control. If we can look back at often, our upbringings, and we can look at it and go, why were we told that girls have to be this way and guys have to be this way? And often it was, in some ways, not even about, sex and gender so much. It was just simply about controlling behavior. It was purely about saying that a particular behavior, if the structure, the ideology can get you to think of it as belonging to a narrow concept, a narrow label, then you're controlled. You not only are you controlled, but now you have a way of being judged by any deviation from it. So anything from, guys don't wear pink, okay, or play with dolls, or girls don't play with trucks, and so on. You have to be interested in these particular things. Everything from Barbie's terrible thing back, I forget the decade it was in, about, well, girls, bad math is hard. Say what? This does have anything to do with one's sex. It has nothing to do with this. And yet, if we can narrow this down to a specific label, then we don't question it. And if we dare step outside of it, then we have the continued judgment and shame. And there's where we get, if we ever, even after we've left, Christianity or Islam or, more Orthodox Judaism or, any of the variations of authoritarian religious structures or even secular forms of it. It's like any time that, even if we've left it, there are moments in which we may find ourselves still judging ourselves by any form of deviation. And why is that? It's like, oh my God, I've left this behind. Why am I still judging myself by this? Because this is how we see the world quite often. It's so simple to make things, into these simplistic and narrow labels. It's how our brains work. And once those things have been established, it's very difficult to break out of. It's not that we can't. We most definitely can. But it is and can be, to varying degrees, a difficult process. So when you find yourself continuing to judge and feel a sense of shame, it is not a personal failing. It is not a character flaw for you. It is a continued effect of having your life, defined in a very narrow way before you had a chance to truly question. We'll get into how we, get past that here in a moment. Because part of what's going on here, and this is from Jesse Baring's book, Bird Perv, the problem with zipping up, love this word, up on our dirtiest little secrets, is that others are doing exactly the same thing. And this means the story of human sexuality that we've come to believe is true is in reality a lie. What's more, it's a very dangerous lie because it convinces us that we're all alone in the world as perverts and hence immoral monsters. Should we ever deviate in some way from this falsely conceived pattern of the normal? Of course, normal there is most definitely being used in the moral sense. Yes, we don't. The amazing thing about once we start questioning these things, once we start getting outside of narrow labels and stereotypes and so on, is just how many of us are on the outskirts. That in fact, that kind of parabola of human behavior is in fact a lot flatter and a lot more spread out than we have been told. And that is wonderful to explore. And that exploration is exactly around that it's ideological rather than simply biological when we consider our own sexuality. That we look at how we are not just feeling but viscerally experiencing sexuality, but how do we think about it? How do we, what are our biases? What are our stereotypes? What are the things that are still present, even from a life that we have since and continue to, move away from? And noting that our identities are not destiny. How often have we even perhaps still been told that, Christianity is, who you are and will always be, and you're just waiting to come back to the fold kind of thing. Not true. Or anything else for that matter. Now, identities are great ways of kind of a shorthand for understanding our experience. But they're not destiny. They're not the only way, and certainly not in a singular way, of considering and being concerned with how we express ourselves. That we can, in fact, learn to expand our labels. That we can start there, because we kind of have to. They've been given to us. But then we can go, do I have to? Do I really? Like, just because I think of myself in this way, or through this word, does it have to be that way? Can I step outside of it? And the answer is very quickly, yes. It might take various amounts of effort, might take, help from others. In fact, quite often it does. But the destiny that we have is a whole lot more open. It is, in fact, a many path process than a singular one. And with this, I love this section. I'm an avid reader, love sci-fi fantasy. Sometimes there's a book that just comes across and they don't really even try necessarily initially to make a specific point. Then you come across this and you're like, okay, and here's this character talking to rather, this person who effectively, had portrayed themselves as God. And he was just basically going, fuck this. Like, absolutely, I am stepping outside of this. He's like, you know what? I am penitent. I am penitent for all the relationships the shame has ruined. I am penitent that I've allowed my shame and unhappiness to spread to others. I have fucked men. I have fucked women. I have sucked numerous pricks, and I've had my pricks sucked by numerous people. I fucked and been fucked. It was lovely. Really lovely. I had an excellent time doing it, and I would gladly do it again. I really would. I've been lucky enough to find and meet and come to hold beautiful people in my arms. Honestly, some beautiful, lovely, brilliant people, and I am filled with regret that my awful self-hate drove them away. I don't know if you made the world. I don't know if you made my people or if they made themselves. But if it was your words they taught me as a child, and if it's your words that encourage this vile self-disgust, this ridiculous self-flagellation, this incredibly damaging idea that to be human and to love and to risk making mistakes is wrong, then, well, I guess fuck you. I swear this needs to be a rallying cry. And we find ourselves understanding where our process has been, that this ridiculous on the face of it self-flagellation that so many are still caught up, myself included. Absolutely. I've been working at this for a couple of decades almost now. And it still rises up every so often. It still it comes up and goes, should you feel good about this? Should you? Isn't this a problem? And it does not have to be. And so I continue the work. And that work can be and will be continued by each and every one of us. And we can do that we have kind of 4 ways, not the only ways, but 4 ways at least here that we can work on, is understanding that no intrinsic part of being human is cause for shame. None. Not a single piece of who you and I are is cause for shame. It cannot be. It's there. It's already. We didn't have any choice in this. We're born into the world. How? I mean, this is where the dogma, the doctrine of sin in all of its various forms is so perniciously awful, because it labels and provides a means of judgment before we ever even have will or choice. And that is simply not true. And further, no immutable characteristics, not our, sex, not our skin color, not our hair color, nothing of who we are that we had no choice in requires adherence to any belief or behavior. Just because we were born into a particular body does not mean that we are somehow beholden to a way of viewing the world or acting in a particular way. We don't have to be. We may be taught certain ways because of who and where we were born and as, but we are not required to continue on that path. That's why I love using this image here of, the chains, because it's frankly, and I totally stole it from a Christian website. And it's often an image that many of us may in fact remember being used in other kinds of we can break the chains of sin. Well, this is actually breaking the chains of sin. Oh, yes, it is. But of that concept that required us to think so poorly of who we are as human beings. And we can break free of that awful dogma. And we can challenge ourselves concerning the perceptions of who we are, including our sexuality. Even the things that may in fact feel like it's okay. Like, oh, this is just the truth. Challenge it anyway. Ask questions. Engage in new behavior. Consensually, of course, and so on. Engage with others. Take a look at how the things of what we have been taught, and the things that we believe are so, just aren't. And in this process, we learn to embrace who we each individually are, who we are together. We let go of old stories. It is not an overnight thing. It is not a process that will be a snap. It may, in fact, find ourselves going down the path and going, I'm really doing really well here. I haven't had a terrible idea or a sense of self-judgment in a while. Then all of a sudden we'll just get smacked upside the head with some. That does not mean that the journey you're on is somehow missing or didn't work or there's somehow something intrinsically wrong with you. It just means that old ideas stick around. They're habits of how to view the world that we were taught. And sometimes it takes a bit to dismantle them and move forward. We can do it. Most of us here who are listening to this, watching, have already started. And even if you haven't, you can. And you are, frankly, by even showing up to the conference and asking this. To even start that process of doubt, to go, is what I was taught the only way of seeing myself, my sexuality, and the world through which I express myself in? Start with the questions. Go from there. And understand that our sexuality affects everything we do. And everything affects our sexuality. The same is true of our spirituality. Understood here as that which is most deeply meaningful to us. We can deny both, but denying them does not mean they are not both alive in every breath and heartbeat of life. It's from Tina Schermer Sellers' book, Sex, God, and the Conservative Church. She's, in fact, one of the resources that drew from and also recommend. We'll say that both Dr. Sellers and Matthias Roberts' books, we'll say as a caveat, they do come from a highly liberal Christian background. And I kept them up there as resources precisely actually for that reason. Because often the first step in moving away from a more fundamentalist is to understand that it isn't the only way to understand the ideology we grew up with. And that really, at the end of the day, my concern is not necessarily that people leave whatever concept of God they may have to the side. But if you can find a way to, keep whatever concept you have, but still express yourself in new ways, still challenge, still find healthy in new ways, and getting away from such ideas of sin and that innate shame, then have whatever ideas you want. It's okay. I mean, the world's a big place. We can all meet there in celebration of who we are, individually and together. Of course, there's Sex and God by Daryl Ray, Purr's book by Jesse Bering, America's War on Sex by Marty Klein. A little older, but still really good information, particularly with what's going on these days. I put in The Scout Mindset by Julia Galef, not because it necessarily focuses on sex, but because it is such a great book for exploring how we view the world and to challenge some of the ways and how biases work at a cognitive level. And of course, for anybody who is looking for a therapist that may be primarily certified in sex work, or rather in sex ideology, education, and so on, is ASEC, the American Association of Sexuality Educators, Counselors, and Therapists. If you go to their website, asec.com, they actually do have a link there to search for and find a certified sex therapist that may be in your area. So with that, thank you, and we'll go to questions.
Wow, that was just terrific. Thank you so much. I just feel like that was refreshing and encouraging. I feel like a weight has been lifted off myself. Thank you for those just affirming things that you reminded us about. We did get some comments. Someone said, tarot cards show the archetypal devil card with chains and getting free from them. It's a universal concept, thinking of that image that you showed. Someone else said, that imagery always felt so strange to me. All of the rules the church insisted on felt like chains, and none of the authoritarian ideology ever felt liberating to me. They're not alone. Yeah. It's very true. Another comment there, Judeo-Christian sexual ideology is baked into the subconscious of the entire Western culture. Egregores follow even when an individual deconstructs. I don't know what that big word means.
I would love to unpack. I followed it. I would love to unpack all of it. We do not have the time. So by all means, you can reach out to me anytime. We'll love to discuss it. Like a 30-second brief, we'll point out that while in one sense I totally agree that to break that down to that, this certain ideas around that are largely associated with Christianity are so kind of baked into much of Western culture, is that I would actually challenge a little bit to that story is actually one that is often perpetuated by Christianity itself. They want us to think, it's the old thing about, well, America was founded on Christian principles. No, it wasn't. But they sure want you to think that. And because they want to have the discussion start and end with themselves. They want it to start with as if there were no other ideas before Christianity.
Right.
Yeah, there were a lot of them. And there's a lot of them that were taken into and used by Christianity and its thinkers throughout the millennia. And it's while we're studying how all of these various ideas kind of came in. So actually, largely it's a good thing to look into, and at the same time, kind of, keeping that nugget of salt at the end to kind of go, it's a whole lot more complicated than that, and that's a good thing because we can find the nuggets even in the midst of the hegemony.
We had a question come in. Someone has requested, please talk about spirituality and how it relates to emotional and intellectual, neurologically is what they said. Yeah, good question. And it's actually one that I'm working on a little bit with my dissertation. But spirituality is kind of weirdly defined. On one hand, I definitely understand the kind of like really people where they're like, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual, as a kind of negative, phrasing. And there's certainly elements there that go, yeah, okay, I can get a little annoyed by this. On the other hand, kind of like, various terms throughout history, like gay, for instance. I literally had a Southern Baptist preacher when I was involved in that. Trying to like, no, we need to take gay away. Gay is happy, and I've never seen a homosexual, happy. Like, well, you need to get out more, buddy. But in a similar sense of like, let's take the word back. Spirituality does not require a supernatural. It does not require a dualistic, metaphysic. So, for me, spirituality is, this is a work in progress, but basically is looked at as another way of looking at the transcendent. It's a way of looking apart from the layered meanings that we can apply to our existence. That is, at one level, very mechanistic. It's not that spirituality can't be broken down to mechanisms. Literally, we can tweak the brain in certain ways, and all of a sudden you'll have, it's so-called spiritual experience. Psychedelic research is certainly experiencing that. We literally have people who are avowed atheists coming out and going, I'm not quite certain anymore. Now, granted, I think they probably need to study philosophy a little bit better to get clearer, but the fact is that we will have experiences that, allow us to jettison a simple way of viewing the world. And that's where I kind of, just use spiritual. Though again, not in any kind of, supernatural or dualistic fashion. Yeah. We had a comment here as well. It's not really a question, but I thought I might share. One of the most accepting and diverse places I've been in is an online platform for erotic role play. I'm not saying it's perfect, but it was a place where nobody was afraid to express their true desires and where there was a lot less judgment than I've found elsewhere.
That's awesome.
It is.
That's great. Absolutely. Go and have fun with that.
Yes, is when we can swap out judgment for curiosity, our world expands, whereas judgment narrows things. But if we can give ourselves permission to just be curious and enjoy, we need to educate ourselves around consent. But really, the field is pretty wide open for the fun that we can have and the ways that we can enjoy ourselves sexually.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. No, I'm really glad you found that. And by all means, share it with anybody you think would be helpful on that. So that's great.
We're so used to, well, we've come out of conservative or fundamentalist religions. It can really be a challenge for us to move beyond that black and white thinking, that binary thinking. It's so we can take ourselves out of the religion, but it's much harder to get ourselves out of that mindset. And we can still, for a while afterwards, be trying to judge things as good or bad. And that's just not how it is. One of the quickest
Hmm.
ways to get ourselves out of the appreciation of any sexual moment is to start judging it, or judging
Yeah.
ourselves in it, or judging our partner in it. We really want to avoid that judgment aspect as much as we can.
Hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. I will say that, one of the first, one of the first and biggest ways of branch for myself, branching outside of, these stories like this must be the way it is, was actually in explorations of polyamory. It's why, even on the image there, books like The Ethical Slide, books like More Than Two and others. This is not a, like, everybody needs to be polyamorous. Not that at all. It has more to do with many of the good books around it and the explorations about it help with challenging the stories that we have around what we think is so that just isn't. And we don't have to necessarily go down a particular lifestyle in order to appreciate the what of course is lovely for those it works for, but we in order to appreciate the challenges that it poses. This is why we like the outskirts. We like the people on the spectrums of the ends, in order to at times point out to us that sure, we may not make everybody this way, but it's a really good reminder to become more comfortable with discomfort. To say that, to get used to the idea that the way I see the world is always limited, and that's not a bad thing. It's okay. We can, all it is a means then of us continuing to challenge those things, to ask new questions, to get into new conversations. And even if we don't end up, going down a particular path or agreeing, it's the exploration that's important. It's the
Mm-hmm.
space that we allow between ourselves to explore new things. That's what's wonderful, and that's
Oh,
where humanity comes. So,
yes,
yeah.
I certainly have hope as I see our society becoming increasingly secular and stepping away from the harsh religious judgments. I look at the younger generations. My daughters are in their 20s, and they just do not seem to have a lot of the same sexual hangups that I had, and that people my age and older than me, if we spent a lot of time in church, and even just the way society was more conservative, there were a lot of judgments and fears, guilt and shame around it, especially anything to do with the LGBTQ two-spirit community. And I just don't see that in the next generation. It's to a much lesser degree. So I feel like we're moving in the right direction, and people are starting to embrace their curiosity and expand their acceptance of people who think differently than they do.
Yeah, in many ways. Yeah, it's really, there's a lot to celebrate. In several pieces to have cautionary tales, but not to lose sight of the fact that there's a lot to celebrate. And we really, this authoritarian streak. Just because we jettison one doesn't mean that all of a sudden the capacity for it has disappeared. The idea of controlling another person to say, no, this is the only way of viewing the world, is not a product of religion. And we know this because religion didn't just come out of nowhere. Religion came out of ourselves.
Right.
So if we understand this as being human made, then we know that proclivity is in us at any time. and to caution whenever we get caught up in thinking, this must be the only way of being, and to challenge even that. So, yeah,
Beautiful.
lots to
David,
celebrate.
this has just been such a fantastic talk. I've really enjoyed your session. Thanks for sharing those great resources as well. I hope people will dig in. This brings us to the end of this session, and we'll have a 15-minute break now, and then I'll see you again, everyone, in another 15 minutes from now.